also, I feel like am I right to say now you studied history, and then I also see historians they're talking about, but I feel like the Western government, at least maybe the UK and the United States, the elites, they are not that interested in knowing the truth or history. I don't feel like they particularly interested in finding out, truly what happened.
No, they're not. They're not at all. At best, when they use history, they use it in ways like making themselves play characters in historical novels. So in Britain, everybody wants to play Churchill. Everybody wants to play, as if they're parties in a film about Churchill. They all want to
Mhm.
play different roles in that film. Nobody wants to play Chamberlain. So this is. But you're absolutely right. Careful study, careful research and investigation of the history of a problem. That never takes place. I mean, we talked at the start of this program about the origins of the crisis in the Middle East and in
Mhm.
the
Yeah,
Palestinian territories and Gaza and Israel. This is not something that you ever see
no,
properly addressed in
Mhm.
Britain today.
No.
Just as most British people, I mean, I can say this with absolute confidence, have no idea that the British Army marched on Beijing in 1860 and burnt down the
Mhm.
Summer Palace and did a lot of other things as well, which are perhaps even worse.
Mhm.
No, the number of people who probably know that, you could probably count them, actually. And that's literally true. And if you don't know that, then you don't understand an awful lot about relations between China and Britain and
Mhm.
the interactions between these two countries and why people in China might feel about Britain in a particular way. You might not understand why Hong Kong is Hong Kong
Mhm.
and not just another city in China. You might not understand very much about very many things. But nobody talks about these things in Britain. Nobody talks about them in France either, which had a
Mhm.
colonial empire of its own. And as with the United States, it always invariably lives in the present day. The past is always part of the present.
Yeah, they even trying to blur this idea that US the
Yeah,
one who dropped the two atomic bombs, which
well, absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
that,
Absolutely. I mean, the contrast here with China
yeah,
and Chinese civilization and the Chinese people, who are the most historically minded
yeah.
culture on earth, could not be starker. As I said, I've explained to many people. I mean, you want to know which nation has chronicled its history best. I
Mhm.
mean, it's China by miles.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
I,
was going to say that it's very different. The attitude towards history is so
yeah,
different.
yeah.
I recently read that there is a thing called Operation Legacy, that when Britain left their former colonies, they burned a lot of the documents.
Oh, yeah.
In particular, I guess in India, they burned so many documents that at one point the ashes was knee deep.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
why? But it's part of your glorious history. Why do you want to
Yeah.
destroy them all? I mean, I don't
Well,
quite
you
get
you
that.
you you say that, Sophie, but it's a very, very interesting fact that the empire is barely ever spoken about here. I mean, it's hardly. I mean, most people know very little. There are no good history books about the British Empire,
Yeah.
about how it worked, for example, what its administrative structures were, and how the entire political system of the empire was held together. I think I said in an earlier program that we did, we were talking about Tibet before. The
Mhm.
reality about Tibet is that after the emperor abdicated in 1911, after there was
Mhm.
the British took advantage
Yeah.
and gained control of Tibet.
Mhm.
Tibet, until Indian independence in 1947 and Chinese liberation in 1949, was an informal part of the British Empire. I
Yeah.
mean, it was. Uh, there would have been we always hear about Lhasa, the capital that nobody was ever allowed to visit. Nobody was ever allowed to visit because the British, who undoubtedly had a representative there, made sure that nobody was allowed to visit it because they wanted to control it, because they understood that control of the Tibetan plateau was important for the control of Inner Asia. So, but that whole history has never been written.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, nobody knows what was going on between the authorities in Tibet, the British authorities in Tibet, the British authorities in Calcutta, the British authorities in Delhi, and of course what London itself was doing and what instructions it was giving. We don't know the names of the officials. We don't know anything. I mean, it is incredible how little about the British Empire, this huge historical fact, is known. And the British never make films about it. They did for a certain brief period in the 60s and 70s, but now they've stopped. It's a long, long time since they made films about the British Empire or talked about it very much. So this enormous event in British history is completely written out of the story. And why? Well, it's so difficult to guess, because if the history of the empire was properly written, Britain would not come across as this paragon of freedom, democracy, free speech, and liberty that the British want everybody to think it is.
It's just too ugly, I guess.
It is far too ugly, exactly. It's far too ugly and far too violent and far too crude. I did read a book where they managed to get some papers, and it showed what the British were doing in West Africa in the late 19th century, and how British ships used to warships used to move around West Africa, and how they used to regularly shell and bomb people there and do all kinds of things. I mean, the almost continuous violence that underpinned the entire enterprise. But that is not something that people want to talk about in Britain today.
Yeah, some people saying that everything we're talking about, the awful things like a genocide, a concentration camps, and you can almost all find its origins in the British Empire, probably somewhere in the world.
Well, it is a structural product of empire. Any empire is by definition a coercive operation. And as such, it will inevitably result in these sort of horrors. And of course, it has its effect on the people who are doing them. Marx, I'm quoting Marx, he once famously said that a people which oppresses others can never itself be free. And he said that, he wrote that whilst he was working in London, which was not coincidentally the capital of the British Empire.
Just so that the US also kind of is strange in a way. Now, of course, US history is also brutal and ugly in a lot of ways. But even things like the Lincoln assassinations. So there were some rumors that his assassin, John Wilkes Booth, that he survived. When he was circled by the forces and by the police, that somehow there was a fire and he somehow survived. There is that rumor.
Oh yeah.
So his families are a little bit curious about that. Like they buried somebody and they thought it was him. Well, it's very easy to check that his family is willing to resume the body, do a DNA test. Well, the U.S. National Park Service said no. Considering how important Lincoln is, and this is an easy question to settle. Why would they deny the family that? That's
well indeed.
Right. So
well indeed.
Anyway.